Why The Force Awakens is a bad Star Wars movie. A review. I'm going to make something like a review here. I've written something. I've already spoken free before, but I thought I wanted to rewrite or really write down my thoughts and insights about Star Wars The Force Awakens. And warning again, spoilers ahead. As to be expected in a review, I'm going to spoil stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie, then stay away and watch it first. J.J. Abrams has done it again. Like with his filming of the last two Star Treks, now in Star Wars Episode 7, Abrams entirely dropped the ball on what these series are about. The last two Star Treks weren't bad movies, but they were horrible Star Trek movies because J.J. Abrams had no clue what Star Trek was meant to be. And likewise, the problem with Star Wars The Force Awakens, it is very apparent that Abrams simply is incapable to grasp what makes a good Star Wars. My critique against The Force Awakens can be broken down to three basic issues: the rehash of Episode 4, the total lack of Star Wars understanding from J.J. Abrams, and of course the horrible massive plot holes. Let's start with the rehash issue. It has been the top criticized issue, and it is very obvious that the entire story of Episode 7 is a complete rehash of Episode 4, only that Rey is now the new Luke. I will not bore you with detailed retelling the stories to compare it. If you look objectively at those episodes, it is clear enough. Having some reminiscences wouldn't be an issue, but plotting the entire movie as a retelling of the first Star Wars film is just ludicrous. Why should I want to see Episode 4 again in a new variant? So again we have the Forsaken Desert planet hero. Again he meets Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon to get around. Again Han has trouble with gangsters he owes something. Again a droid has secret plans which everyone looks for. Again we have a Death Star with one vulnerable part which a ragtag band of rebels with 10 X-Wing and a few hand grenades can destroy. That is one of the most lazy, play-it-safe fan service that I have ever witnessed. Fans have whined and cried ever since the prequel trilogy had launched. They wanted it all back like it was, and Disney decided to crave into a mere fan service handout. From the perspective of the fans, apparently it worked. But as a new Star Wars movie, I have this bad déjà vu, and I wonder how unoriginal a story can be. Now let me make two things clear. First, fanboys have ridiculously thick rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the original trilogy, and a totally over-the-top critical perspective on the prequels. It is almost reverse true. The original trilogy was okay, and the prequel trilogy was what Star Wars was meant to be. The original trilogy wasn't that good. It established the tone and idea well, but having all 6 movies on DVD, I can clearly say I watched the original trilogy maybe a handful of times, and the prequels more times than I can count, simply because the original films are something you watch once or maybe twice, because honestly there isn't so much to see, and the original trilogy has some horrible lengths at times. For me, the prequels are like the embodiment of Star Wars. Here, George Lucas could finally make Star Wars films with modern technology he always wanted to make. You have Jedi and Sith, you get to see a lot of the galaxy, and you have so many cool and epic lightsaber duels. Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and of course the cool 2 duels at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Those are Jedi and Sith at the height of their power, and you could see why they are so respected and feared, why the doings of Jedi and Sith have a profound effect on the galaxy, because they are badass powerful. Compared to that, the geriatric lightsaber duel from Episode 4 was just hilarious. I'm sorry. Old men with rheumatics waving sticks. I always found self-proclaimed fans irritating who actually didn't like the vision of George Lucas and somehow had some mysterious other Star Wars in mind, which wasn't what George Lucas wanted. Lucas had said many times that the prequels embody everything he wanted Star Wars to be, and if you don't like that, you simply can't actually be a Star Wars fan. You may not like it, but Lucas is the author and inventor of Star Wars, and the story is what he wants it to be. If he thinks Han doesn't shoot first because he designs him like a classic John Wayne character who sticks to a code of honor, his word always trumps that of fans. But somehow Star Wars fans have always been under the delusion they have somehow a greater right to tell what Star Wars should be than the author himself. That is the basic problem, the fans. For Star Wars, the fandom has always been more a bane than a blessing. Over the year, the critique, especially versus the prequels, has reached ridiculous levels. When I watched the prequels back then, before reading anything about what so-called fans thought about it, I liked them and had only a few issues with it. For once, I never thought Jar Jar Binks was sort of annoying. He was not on my radar on any measure, neither good or bad. I understood his role and it was okay he was there in the first episode. The sheer amount of venom that people poured on Jar Jar and George Lucas for inserting Jar Jar is just breathtaking and has long gone out of any reasonable proportions. Yes, some comments of child Anakin were a bit too strange, and yes, the love scenes between Anakin and Padme were sometimes not so well. But why people bitched at the prequel trilogy had connections to real-life stuff, like a Senate, like politics, is beyond me. I thought that was one of the most interesting things, to see how Palpatine, aka Sidious, maneuvered the Republic into a fall. He didn't defeat this enemy, the Jedi and the Republic, like thousands of movie and book villains before, by force. No, but through intelligent plotting, by using the system against itself. I found the idea how Palpatine used the system of democracy to undo democracy very fascinating to see. And as such, Palpatine was the most interesting villain I have ever seen. I know fans bitched about, oh, we have to see boring stuff about taxes. Seriously? I mean, how simplistic has a villain to be? It was especially that intelligent plotting which made Palpatine unique and fascinating. But fans rejoice. Now we are back to dumb villains in the form of Kylo Ren and Supreme Leader Snoke. No more intricate plots, no more complex detailed how to outmaneuver the enemy, just plain boring evildoers with an even bigger Death Star and don't bother me with detail, huzzah! Which leads me to point 2, the plot holes. There are so many, you could make Swiss cheese of this movie. Almost nothing of it makes sense, and thus it stands in the starkest contrast with the prequels, where everything was explained and within the Star Wars logic made perfect sense. People criticized Anakin as a whiny kid. Yes, he was a whiny kid, and it made sense why. He grew up as a slave boy, he had abilities above others, and grew up in an unjust society. Of course he had to be like that, because it made sense in that way that eventually we would see to grow him into Darth Vader. People who become evil usually start as bitching whiners. You know, people aren't born as larger-than-life villains. Why does Poe Dameron put the information the fate of the galaxy hinges into a droid and sends him away into the desert? Why does he stay and fight and not run when it is clear that he cannot save the villagers anyway? How likely is it that you can find a tiny droid in a vast desert of a planet? Who bets the fate of the galaxy on that slim chance to save a handful of village chicks? Isn't the likeliness way overstretched that the BB droid finds Rey and Finn finds Rey and the Millennium Falcon just stands there and Han Solo just happens to stumble over them just the second they go into space? The movie is just a vast list of way overstretched probabilities, even when you think that sometimes the Force arranges stuff. Here the Force really has worked overtime. Luke's old lightsaber just happens to be in the chest there. Death Star 3 just happens to have a vulnerable spot. R2-D2 just happens to wake up at the right time. With this 90% of the map known to him, wouldn't it be manageable to find Luke Skywalker? Why are those tiny 10% of the map so important? Can't Leia force feel her brother anymore? And why does Luke hide on a rock for 30 years just because one student fell to the dark side? So Luke forsakes the entire galaxy, goes emo and cries, instead of just rebuilding the Jedi Order as Yoda told him to do. Pass on his knowledge. Instead, emo Luke goes on a rock and cries for 30 years. And here is a hint, Luke. If you don't want to be found, don't leave a damn map behind. The Force Awakens is clearly designed for a young audience, which never has seen a Star Wars movie before, or to whom the previous movies, not to speak the books, are unknown or just not important. How else would you justify that the entire expanded universe from the books is tossed out of the window? Over the years, the books had established a vast, intricate and fascinating cosmos of what happened after Episode 6. Luke married Mara Jade, they had a son. Han and Leia had 3 children. They created the new Jedi Order. There were so many cool and wonderful stories and characters, but like with Star Trek before, J.J. Abrams decided just to toss everything out of the window and to hell with the past. Like he blew up Romulus and Vulcan, 2 of the coolest planets of the Star Trek universe, so all the former stories on characters from the expanded universe are now gone. All of it. And for this? Sorry if I say that it is a bad exchange, because the expanded universe was so much better. Now 30 years passed and we are told almost nothing. What did Han Solo, Luke and Leia do during 30 years? We don't know. What happened to the Republic, the Senate, the Imperials? We don't know. Did the Republic form a treaty with the Imperials? Or is the galaxy in chaos? Are there any other forces involved? Nothing. The prequels had revealed such a vast carpet of details before us, revealing us a galaxy full of planets, spaceships, power groups and whatnot. And here, the entire galaxy seems to consist of 3 planets. The rebels have 1 planet, the Imperials have 1 planet, and that is Jakku, where Rey waits for unknown reasons endlessly for something to happen. Rebels and Imperials each just have 1 planet, and whoever destroys the other first wins by default. And more plot holes. What sense does it make for the Imperials 2.0 to build another Death Star when the first 2 so miserably failed serving their purpose? What good would it do to nuke 4 random planets? Why should we care for these planets we never saw or heard mentioned before? At least we cared for Alderaan because it was Leia's home planet, and the scene with Alderaan was very emotional, with Tarkin and Vader and Leia around. Here, just some random planets are nuked and I wonder just what the fuck happened. And why has the Rebel Alliance after 30 years just a dozen X-Wing? And why builds the Empire 2.0 a Death Star which can conveniently be destroyed by a few X-Wings and 3 guys stumbling around in the superstructures with hand grenades? The Rebels totally rush way too quickly to find a solution to destroy Death Star number 3. Han doesn't even mention the plan. Don't ask, I fly in. Some solution will magically present itself. I don't need any stupid plans. And then the characters. Oh dear. Kylo Ren, aka Darth Emo, is a farce. He was menacing at first with the mask and all, but the moment he took it off, all the menacing coolness evaporated. Why does he even wear a mask when he always takes it off? He's just a whiny Darth Vader fanboy who falls into tantrums all the time, smashing his computer like an emo kid who failed in a video game. And since it is now Disney, no more killing off incompetent officers. Apparently now even the Empire has more diversity than a New York startup company. Look, the former Aryan Nazi Empire suddenly has blacks and women in positions of power too. I was just half expecting an evil Wookiee admiral, which made me wonder why political correctness took over the Empire, but oh well, with the new Star Wars you better don't think too much like in a Michael Bay movie. Wonder at the great visuals and leave your brains at home. Speaking of PC, I acknowledge that the new actors are capable, but the roles, no. Poe Dameron was the only believable new character, but he had way too less screen time. Somehow, like a jack-in-the-box, he always seems to randomly appear and vanish. And Finn, unfortunately, was the very embodiment of a black placeholder character. Finn served no purpose in the story whatsoever. He contributed absolutely nothing to the story. If he would not be there, nothing would have evolved any different. He was just a toned-down Jar Jar Binks, mostly serving for comic relief. Is there any more condescending way to add a black main character than a dork like Finn for no other reason than to have a black character? There are way cooler ways to have black characters, like Mace Windu or Lando Calrissian. Finn is blatantly just a placeholder to have a black character. But even worse on many levels is Rey. Rey is the woman who in every moment has to prove she can do everything instantaneously without training, without trouble, just because she's a woman, and woman can do everything without man. Which, since Frozen seems to be Disney's new agenda anyway, it is not that Rey is a female lead character. It is not that Rey is a strong character as a woman. It is how Rey is a Mary Sue-like character which excels at everything effortlessly. She can handle herself against pirates all alone. There are so many in-your-face scenes like Finn grabbing her hand and she proclaims like 3 or 4 times she doesn't need that. Han gives her a blaster and she says something like, I can tear of myself, I don't need your blaster. Which is the most stupid thing to answer. Rey can do telepathy, reading Kylo Ren's mind just so. She can force persuade without ever training. She can use a lightsaber to defeat Kylo Ren, who has been trained for years, despite the fact that Rey had never held a lightsaber in her hand ever. She can fly the Millennium Falcon just so. She can repair the Falcon, of course. She has just to close her eyes a moment and whoopsie, she's much better in lightsaber fighting than Darth Emo after years of training under Luke and the Fist Lord. I'm sorry, I don't have a problem with strong female characters in the lead. Leia was a strong lead character, even Padme was one, and they were convincing. They didn't have to be Mary Sue's, which can do everything perfect without any training or challenge. This entire main cast has just written Disney, aka we cast a woman, a black and a Hispanic to fuck you stupid white man with our liberal PC diversity agenda written all over. And I loathe it when companies do that. It is not that I mind a black or female character. Mace Windu was the coolest Jedi ever. Leia and Padme were strong and cool characters. But they were not just implemented as the black and the female character like Finn and Rey. They are only there to fill a checklist and they are implemented bad. That does a disservice to black and female lead characters. Finally, there is something to say about the vision of Star Wars. Harrison Ford once said to George Lucas, you can write these sentences, but you can't say them. Ford, like so many so-called fans, never truly understood Star Wars. Star Wars is a space opera, and the characters are supposed to be iconic archetypes. They speak in an elevated form like an opera character or a character from a theater play. They have always been meant to be larger-than-life characters, and that counts for the comedians and the fools and the despicable characters just the same. That is why Watto, Jar Jar Binks and Newt Gunray from the Trade Federation act and speak like they do. They are iconic characters from a sort of opera. Star Wars is supposed to be a modern mythos. Characters from myths speak different from normal people in real life, and that is why Star Wars is a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. It is nowhere land. It is not our world, and that is why Abrams didn't get. His characters speak and act like regular sci-fi characters. Just look how many millions of memes, cartoons, parodies, quotes and fan stories evolved from the prequels. Every second or third sentence said became a meme or parody. I cannot imagine any dialogue, one-liner or scene from The Force Awakens has any quality to ever become a meme or to become the source of a parody or famous quote. Almost half of everything from The Phantom Menace has become a quote or a meme, because the Star Wars characters from Lucas speak in this theatrical opera mode. Fear leads to anger. Wipe them out. I didn't come to free slaves. We picked up another pathetic life form. There is always a bigger fish. We take the long way. I will make it legal. It is in their nature to make us wait this long. No need to report anything until we have something to report. At last we will have revenge. Always two there are, a master and an apprentice. I could go on for hours with that, but Episode 7 has nothing quotable at all because J.J. Abrams simply failed to understand Star Wars the same way he failed to understand Star Trek before.